Alright, let's talk about that meeting. You know the one? The big presentation. The one you rehearsed 100 times. The client nodded, the energy was just right, and everyone was smiling like they actually got it. So you did what advertising people do. You went straight to celebrate. Until someone, drink in hand, asked, "Just checking. Do we need to book another meeting? Or is this a win?" Welcome to The Unspoken Yes, the podcast that confirms what everyone suspects. Your idea drowned after 5 rounds of internal feedback, the room checked out by slide 2, and halfway through your pitch, your client was already planning dinner. Today's episode, why selling creative ideas has become harder than making them. There was a time when making the idea was the hardest part. You had to fight the brief, you had to chase the insight, you had to shape it, twist it, beat it into something with a spine. And once you had it, selling it was stressful, sure, but simple. Someone said yes, someone said no, a decision was made, done. But that's not how it works anymore, is it? Today, selling creative ideas is harder than making them. Not because ideas get worse, but because the yes lost its owner. And when nobody owns the yes, accountability evaporates, and so does your work.
Surprise, surprise. Surprise, surprise.
Well, there's something we need to get straight, because this is where agencies often misread the situation. We like to say clients don't want bold ideas anymore, that they've become conservative, risk-averse, afraid. And as comforting as it sounds, it's mostly wrong. If you've sat on the client side even briefly, you know that's not really what's going on. Clients aren't rejecting your ideas because they wake up thinking, how do I kill creativity today? Well, maybe some wake up like this, but not all of them. Generally, they wake up thinking, how do I not screw this up? Or in layman's terms, what they are rejecting is personal risk. Think about the people who actually sign off on the work. They're not rewarded for being brave and taking risks. They're rewarded for staying out of trouble, for not breaking anything, for not creating problems internally, for not becoming the person whose name comes up in the "how the f*** does this happen" meeting. So when they lean toward things that feel justifiable, things with data, precedent, or a clear process behind them, it's not because they hate creativity. It's because approving bold ideas never comes with a life insurance policy for your ass if someone higher up decides that they don't like it. And this is precisely where the structure of organizations really matters. Decisions don't move through individuals anymore. They move through groups. Marketing talks to brand, brand talks to legal, legal talks to procurement, procurement talks to finance. Do you know the drill? Now stop and zoom out. What do you say? Yeah, the problem almost always comes down to the same 2 things: power and fear. They just show up in different directions. Sometimes it's top-down self-preservation. There's someone high up in the orchard with a title that sounds decisive, usually a president or a CMO, who makes every company's decision personally. Why? Because this person is also well paid, very visible, and has a lot more to lose than to gain if someone farther down the road doesn't like your great idea. I call this management insecurity. Other times, the fear runs bottom up. How? With companies hiring people to lead, to decide, to use judgment, and then punishing their initiative and their mistakes. So they, the people, do what smart people do in unsafe environments. They avoid ownership, they defer decisions, and they hide behind the process. Not because they're incompetent, but because they're protecting themselves. Again, management insecurity. And if you thought this phenomenon only happens on the client side, you're totally wrong. Agency people work in the same exact way. We'll get into that in a minute. What does that create? No single owner of the yes, no shared urgency, and definitely no clean accountability. Not because nobody cares, but because everyone has their own priorities, KPIs, and deadlines, their own mess to deal with. So the entire structure optimizes for something very specific. Don't be the one who took the risk.
Who, me?
And there's another layer to this that doesn't get talked about enough. Everything is moving faster than ever, and everyone knows it. Clients are under constant pressure to react, to jump on the next trend, to not miss whatever feels important this week. So they ask for more faster to avoid feeling like they are falling behind. Agencies respond the only way they can, with the tools, formats, and thinking they already have, just as a solution repackaged for tomorrow's answers. Both sides think they're being agile, but what they're actually doing is playing the wrong game. And eventually, nobody is happy with the outcome. Not the client, not the agency. In that context, internal process and alignment becomes safety. More alignment meetings, more checkpoints, more reviews, more let's just make sure everyone is comfortable. By now, we all are well aware that from the client side, this behavior is a way to share responsibility. But how do agencies react to this? Well, from the agency side, decks become the answer. We create longer, careful decks that don't try to persuade as much as they try to protect. And it's very clear when that shift happens. The deck stops asking for a decision and starts anticipating objections that haven't even been raised yet. The result is that we are no longer guiding the conversation. We're preemptively defending ourselves against any future email. The idea is still there, technically, it's just wearing a helmet now. And this is where we need to talk about persuasion, because most of us are working with the wrong definition. If I ask you right now to raise your hand if you think persuasion means convincing someone, arguing harder, or explaining better, I'm sure most of you would raise not one, but both hands. The tricky part is that's not how persuasion actually works. Persuasion is helping someone make a decision they already want to make, but are afraid to own. Which brings us to the real gap. Persuasion leads to decisions and alignment leads to comfort. Comfort feels good in the meeting and decisions feel risky afterwards. And when alignment replaces persuasion, the word doesn't get rejected, it just slowly loses momentum. That's why so many projects don't die, they just fade. In a nutshell, if your instinct after every meeting is to add more slides, that's not a strategy, that's anxiety. So no, selling ideas isn't about pushing harder. It's about reading the room properly, finding where the real agreement already exists and building from there. Because until someone feels safe enough to own the yes, no amount of slides will do it for them. And obviously, nothing really moves. Alrighty, enough assessment of the current state of the game. Let's talk about solutions now. Let me share how I personally try to deal with this. And please don't take it as advice. Take it for what it is, just my experience, because it might or it might not work for you. The first thing I've learned to do is stop pitching ideas in abstract terms. What does that mean? It means I don't start the presentation focusing on how bold the ideas are or how creative they feel. My goal is never to impress right from slide 2. I prefer to start talking about what I know the client already cares about. It's a way to build a strong foundation that eventually will hold the weight of the main idea. And in case you are wondering where I take this info or insights to build this structure from, let me tell you, it's not only from the brief, surprise, but from the meeting where they explain the brief. In those meetings, I like to pay close attention to the side comments, to the small frustrations they might share during the meeting, to the things they mention and then move on from too quickly, because there's usually where the real objective is hiding. And why do I do this? Because as we know, no brief is a perfect brief. Translating your thoughts and goals into instructions is never an easy task. And not everybody feels equally comfortable expressing their thoughts. That's precisely why, most often than not, you feel the brief you just got has holes in it. Because not everything you need to do the job has been shared. But those thoughts are still in their heads, and in one way or another, they'll surely come out during the briefing conversation. Now, what happens when there's no clear objective in the brief? Well, I try my best to not leave the room without it, obviously. Sometimes that means asking very simple AV questions. Not to be annoying, but to force small choices that eventually reveal the big one. Because once the real objective is clear, the idea has something solid to attach to. And this is extremely important, because if the idea doesn't connect to something they already value, it doesn't feel risky. It feels irrelevant. I also try to make sure the idea can survive without me in the room. Because if the idea only works when I'm there explaining it, it's not gonna make it through the internal conversations we'll never be part of. So I spend less time polishing slides and more time making sure the story holds on its own. And let me tell you something about me. I'm ruthless about flow. If one slide doesn't naturally lead to the next, it's out. If something needs me in the room to make sense, it goes to the appendix. And here, I'm going to open a big can of worms. All those numbers and graphs we love so much and we always like to put in our creative decks are only killing your idea. Yes, we might need them to support strategy or media, but do we really need them to sell the creative concept? And what are we selling here? Strategy, media, or creativity? That's it. Strategy should be sold and approved before you get to present the creative idea. The test is simple. Can someone else open the deck, start at the slide 1, and reach the end without needing me? Because at some point, someone will have to retell the idea in their own words. And if it breaks there, the deck was never really solid to begin with. And that's usually where things fall apart. Something else I've learned the hard way is to limit noise early. And I know this sounds terribly generic. By noise, I mean well-intentioned interruptions, side debates, or extra opinions. The stuff that feels collaborative, but actually raises the risk level in the room. And risk is exactly what everyone in that room is already trying to avoid. My approach? I think of my role less as presenter and more as host. My job is to guide the conversation, to connect the dots, and to make sure the idea doesn't get pulled in 5 different directions at once. That means opening the presentation, setting expectations early, not to control the room, but to project the idea long enough for someone to actually decide, and to keep the flow and rhythm of the deck no matter who's talking. And something we don't do enough to control noise is to rehearse. 100-200 times. You have to rehearse the presentation. Try to get a step ahead of your client when it comes to potential questions they might ask. How? During rehearsals, you'll identify those questions while you still have time to find the right answer. So when the question comes up during the meeting, you can go straight to the point, avoiding deviations. Because I'm telling you, once the room gets noisy, the default reaction is to slow everything down. And slowing things down is how ideas quietly disappear. And last but not least, I've stopped thinking of selling ideas as a single moment. I don't like treating the pitch as the finish line. I think about what happens after when I leave the room. Who has to defend this when I'm not there? Who has to explain it internally? Who carries the risk once the meeting is over? Usually, that person will be your client, the one you are presenting to. And since you talk to your client on a daily basis, and probably you already know each other quite well, build a deck with them in mind. Speak their language when writing those slides. Because no one feels comfortable presenting something that is not theirs. At least I don't. So build a deck not as your deck, but as your client's deck. And trust me, when you do that, the conversation changes. Not always dramatically, but enough. None of this guarantees a yes, but it increases the chances that when someone does say yes, they actually mean it. And these days, the only yes that matters is the one someone is willing to defend. So yes, that meeting you walk out of without knowing if it was a win or not, chances are nothing went wrong. The idea landed, the room followed, and nothing broke. It just became part of a reality where saying yes has a cost. And owning that cost is the harder part. That's the game now. Ideas aren't harder to make, and people aren't suddenly less creative. What's harder is getting from agreement in the room to ownership outside of it when someone has to put their name on the line. If this episode felt uncomfortably familiar, that's probably not a coincidence. Subscribe to The Unspoken Yes if you want to keep having these conversations, not just listening to them once and moving on. If someone in your team is still replaying that meeting in their head, send them this episode. It might save you a follow-up call. And if you're dealing with this in real life right now, client side or the agency side, drop me a note at theunspokenyes@gmail.com. I'm genuinely interested in how it looks from where you are sitting. That's it. See you in the next one.